In this lesson, we are looking at the Somerset level floods. So this links in to our topic on the challenges of natural hazards, and we're looking at UK hazards now. So we need to understand the causes of the Somerset floods, the effects of the Somerset floods, and how they responded to these floods. So in relation to where we are in this topic, we are still looking at weather hazards in the UK, and then after this we'll be moving on to look at climate change. So we're coming towards the end of our final topic. Okay, so what I would like you to do first is probably to write the title, Somerset Level Floods 2014, and then can I get you to describe the location of this? So things you'll need to mention are where it is in relation to England, so what coast is it on? So if we draw on our compass points, you know, we're finding it in this region, so which region is this? You could talk about the sea that it goes onto, so what is the name of this sea? You could talk about the country that it's close to as well, so you could name what this country is called. Okay, and then you could zoom into the area and talk about regions within the Somerset level area and the river that goes through it. So pause the video here and have a go at describing the location of the Somerset levels. Okay. So what we have here is some more information about the location. So Somerset Levels and Moors is a unique flat landscape. Now the fact that it's flat is important because we're learning about flooding. So if the relief is flat, it means that there won't be a lot of surface runoff, which is good. However, there'll be no release, so it won't move. It'll just kind of stay stagnant there, and then you know the flood will then be there for longer, so that will cause complications. And that extends for about 265 square miles across the north and centre of the country, and Somerset is in the west of England. Now, thousands of years ago, this area was actually covered by the sea, and you can see that in this image here. But now they have artificial drains, irrigation and modifications to allow productive farming, but flooding is still a problem. So make sure you've got some notes from this slide. So why did Somerset experience floods in 2014? So the following facts are reasons why Somerset flooded, and I want you to write down these facts and then develop them into sentences that explain why the Somerset experienced flooding. So you need to go a little bit further. So remember that areas of low pressure is when the air is rising, cooling and condensing. So we're going to have lots of rainfall in this area. Okay, and this was coming from the air mass, the tropical maritime. Okay, 350 millimetres of rain fell in January and February, so that's more than the average. Remember that the region is very flat, so it wouldn't have been able to run off. High tides and storm surges were experienced at the coast. I remember that Somerset is found on the coastline, it's found on the west coast of England, and rivers have not been dredged for 20 years. So when you're answering number 4, look at this information here. So this is showing you how dredging is working. So you can see that there's lots of silt on the base of the riverbed. So if there's lots of silt on the riverbed, that is going to essentially mean that the river can hold less water. So if they remove the silt, then the river will be able to hold more water, and then flooding is less likely. But because they hadn't been dredged for 20 years, that would have led to problems. So answer the 4 questions here, and you might want to draw a diagram for dredging, and then we'll go through the answers in a minute. Okay, so make sure please you green pen your work using the information on this slide. I'm not going to go through it because I kind of did in a little bit detail initially, but please just make sure that you've got everything down. And if there's any keywords you don't understand, so I'm going to highlight a few keywords. If there's anything that you don't understand, please make sure that you write down a definition for them. So these are really important. Surface runoff, saturated sediment, these all come from the river topic that you did at the end of year 9. Okay. So what we're going to do now is look at the effects and responses to Somerset level floods. So you can see that the effects are what happens. So we've got here houses being sliding through the ground, being saturated. It then meant that there was a lot of mass movement. So the houses collapsed, so that would have left people homeless, would have left economic implications. And then the responses here are what they're doing. So this response is showing us that they are dredging the river so that next time there's a flood, the river will be able to hold more water. So make sure you know the difference between an effect and a response. So what we're going to do now is look at some information. So when you're reading through this, I want you to decide whether you think it's an effect or a response, and then look at whether it's a social, economic, or environmental effect or response. And then there are some challenge questions, and you would get these challenge questions from the Caboodle textbook. So you'd go to Caboodle, and it was page 34 and 35, and that's the AQA, the GCSE one. So these are challenge questions if you want to challenge yourself. So let's have a go at some together. So effect is going to be my yellow orangey colour, and response is going to be my greeny colour. So residents evacuated to temporary accommodation for several months. This would be a response. So the reason that they were having to do that is probably because their houses were flooded and destroyed. And we've got this one here. So it says 600 houses were flooded. So as a result, they had to be evacuated. We had here over 1,000 livestock was evacuated, so animals, so that they weren't, left unable to eat because the ground's been saturated or to die. So they were evacuated. 60 farms were evacuated. But why? Why did they have to be evacuated? Well, it's because of this statement here. 14,000 hectares of agricultural land was underwater for 3 to 4 weeks. So please go through and do the rest for the remainder. And remember to decide whether you think it's a social, economic, or environmental impact or response. Okay. So here we just have some image, a little bit more detail about the Somerset level floods. So in an attempt to get more water moving and more quickly, the Environment Agency imported 3 high-capacity pumps from the Netherlands. So these are what we can see here. And it's hoped that they would clear 7.3 million tonnes of water each day. So they were trying to use very hard engineering strategies to get rid of this water very quickly, so that they could, stop the impacts of the flooding. However, because they're removing the water from there, the water has to go somewhere else. So that could then cause, other consequences to another river somewhere in the west of England. A few days later, we have military help and specialist vehicles to help affected areas. However, this was a few days later, and it might have been a little bit too late. And you can see here how deep the river is from the how far it's going up these officers' legs. Okay, and you can see also in the background that luckily this wall is stopping the water from getting into the houses, but it's very close to the point where the fences start to become not as rigid and structured, so the water will start to seep through. So here is a little challenge that you can do to, check your map skills. On page 36 and 37 in the Caboodle AQA textbook, you can answer these questions 1A, B, C, D to H and I using the information on the screen. So you'll need to be able to do you need to be able to look at contour lines and be able to identify whether the ground is steep or flat. You'll need to be able to look at the 6-figure grid references and 4-figure grid references, directions, so using compass points. You'll also need to be able to do measuring distances. So remember that when you measure distance, you use a ruler and then you need to convert it into either miles or kilometers, depending on what it is. So have a go at those, please. And then that's the end of the lesson.